Today we're going to get into the holiday spirit. We're going to make some Christmas ornaments. Stay tuned for the Woodturning Workshop. Every year the holiday season catches up with me and I'm always rushing to make gifts for my friends. And that's the time of year, where people who knit, people who sew, and woodturners, we turn. Well, I'm going to get an early start this year, and the gift I'm going to make for all my friends this year is a Christmas ornament. They're beautiful, elegant. They'll be something your friends will treasure forever. Let's get started. First, the wood we're going to be using for today is padauk for the icicle and ambrosia maple for the bulb. To start with, we want to round out the blank for the bulb. We're going to use a 4-prong drive center and a live center to hold it. The grain on our blank is running parallel with the lathe, so that means we can use a roughing gouge. Make sure you have your eye protection on and your sleeves are rolled up for safety. Remember, this is going to be a little bit bouncy since it's a square blank. I want the handle down. I'm going to rub the bevel first, lift the handle up till I start seeing a cut, and then just go to the side. Come back. Okay. Now I want to come back to the left. We're getting close. One way to test to see if it's out around or not is rest your tool up on top. Hear that rattling noise? That means I still have some flat spots. Just a little bit further. Let's see. Excellent. Next thing I want to do is cut a tenon on this end to go into the jaws of my chuck. Just take my parting tool. The first cut I want to make is just to flatten the end. I'm riding the bevel and just letting the tool go down into the wood. Okay, now I want to cut about a 1/4 inch tenon. My jaws are dovetailed, so this part of the tenon right here needs to angle in slightly that direction. The other important thing is that this flat part right here is flat, or at least goes in that direction also. I want this to rest, the outer edge to rest on the chuck jaws. That looks good. Okay, we're going to put the wood into the chuck now. For those of you who are beginners or new to wood turning terminologies, I want to explain what a tenon is real quick. A tenon is this piece of wood right here. It's something that inserts into something else. In this case, the tenon is going to go into the jaws, and the jaws are going to clamp down and hold the wood. We're going to want to hollow out the ball of the Christmas ornament in a minute, so the first thing I want to do is to drill a hole in here. I'm going to use a Jacob's chuck with a bit large enough to accept my hollowing tools. A Jacob's chuck is just like the end of your drill you have at home, except it has a Morse taper on it which goes into your tailstock. Bring the bit up to the end of the wood without touching it. Start the lathe, and now we're going to slowly feed the drill into the wood by turning the handle on the tailstock. Go in, back off. That helps clear the shavings out. Go back in. The bulb is going to be about 2.5 inches high. I want to make sure I drill this hole all the way through because I need a hole on both ends. You're going to reach a point, though, where it's going to be kind of a hard thing to keep cranking this in, cranking it out. So now that I've reached a certain depth, I can actually loosen the tailstock and just move it forward by hand and push in and pull out. Before I hollow, I want to make the outside of the bulb. As you can see, this is not a perfect circle, and that is actually something I prefer. If it's a perfect circle, that's tough to make, but it also looks kind of bland. This has some nice shape and dimension to it, so it gives it character. We're going to start off with our spindle gouge, and it's basically just making a large bead. I'm going to rub the bevel, start to make contact. I'm going to roll and lift the back handle. So I'm going to roll and lift, and just take a little bit at a time. Actually, did you hear that bouncing? That's a little bit out of round since I remounted it, so I real quickly just want to come in here. So when I make contact with the bevel now, it won't bounce. Remember, you sneak up on a bead, a little bit at a time. One thing you got to keep in mind when you're doing this part of the bulb right here, you want this part to be flat. If you look at this bulb I've made already, there's a perfect match between the stem and the bulb. That's because I flattened out the bottom of the bulb at this point. Now we're going to make the other end of the bulb. So I want it to be about right here, so I'm just going to start working my way in. Come back here, remove some of the wood in the way. You start taking too much of a cut, just come back, take a little bit off, and go back and start that cut again. That's looking good. I like this shape. It's not quite perfect. That makes it handmade, makes it special. I don't want to thin this out anymore right now because the next step is to hollow this out, and I need all the strength I can get from this wood while I'm doing it. The first tool we're going to start hollowing with is this replaceable tip cutter. One little problem, it just won't quite fit in the hole, so I'm going to take my parting tool and I'm going to widen the hole just enough to get it in there. Now, I have this tool to where it's just on center line, and when I tip this up, this edge is going to start scraping away wood. And all I'm doing right now is widening the original drill hole. I'm going in a step at a time. I go in, I make a slight cut this way, feel my way back, advance the tool, cut back in a little bit more. Just take little tiny nibbles, little tiny steps. Okay, I've got a good start going there. One thing I don't want to do though, I don't want to go too much further in. I don't want to go out the bottom of the bulb. So I'm going to make a real expensive depth gauge here. I'm going to line this up, take my depth gauge paper, and mark it on the tool to how far I can safely go. So I know once that reaches the lip of the bulb, that's as deep as I want to go. Once your tool starts bouncing around, it probably means that that's getting full of shavings. So if you have some compressed air, you can blow the shavings out and keep cutting. We've gone as far with this tool as we can now. I want to start making a curve and doing the outer edge of the bulb. So I'm going to use a simple scraper tool that has a curve on it. Same rules as before. Nibble in a little bit to your left, come back, advance the tool, nibble the next bit off. When you're hollowing, there's always that fear of going through the side of the piece. With a little bit of practice, though, you can learn to visualize where your tool tip is. With this tool, I know that the tip is directly in line with the shaft, so the first thing I can visualize is to just draw a straight line, and I can know where the tip is there. It's about 1.5 inches in front of the curve, so that's another measurement I keep in mind. So I can visualize while I'm hollowing where that tip is at all times. A little bit of practice, it's not too hard to do. One other neat thing about hollowing one of these out, it doesn't have to be pretty. No one's ever going to see inside of it. All we're doing is removing some weight so the Christmas ornament won't fall off the tree. Now that we've got the hollowing out of the way, I want to start removing some of this excess wood. We're going to use our parting tool. Remember, don't go too deep too fast because there's a hole drilled through that area. Going to grab our spindle gouge. Come here and finish refining the shape of the bulb. Okay, I don't want to go any further than that because now I want to sand and put a finish on. Remember to slow your lathe down a little bit so you don't burn the wood. And I'm going to start with 220 and just work my way up through 600. One tip about choosing your sandpaper, make sure you choose a grit that is strong enough or large enough to get rid of any tool marks you have. If you leave some of those marks as you move to the higher and higher grits of paper, they're just going to stay there. So the very first grit you choose is the most important grit you choose. That should be good enough. Ambrosia maple is a beautiful wood. Look at all the coloration throughout this piece. The coloration is caused by the ambrosia beetle. They're the guys that made these holes. Now, we're going to apply a little polyurethane by hand, and then we're going to speed the lathe up and use that to dry the finish. Apply a little pressure. That causes friction, which causes heat, and that dries up that polyurethane and cures it for you. Also buffs it up, gives you a nice, beautiful shine. Now we're just going to part the ball off and catch it in our hand. Make sure you make a flat cut for that tenon to fit properly. There we go. You might wind up with a little bit of wood left here, so just take a sharp chisel and part that off. Now we're ready to start turning the icicles of the Christmas ornament. I've got a blank, I've rounded it out between centers, and now I have it mounted in a chuck and with a live center. As you can see, we're going to make this in two pieces. I've already laid my marks out on my blank. It's just simple spindle turning from this point on. So use your imagination, have fun, let your personality come out. We're going to start with a small spindle gouge. We're going to start the tailstock in and work our way back, a little bit at a time. At this point, I've just been getting some wood out of the way. Now I'm ready to start making the first shape of the icicle. Just delicate little cuts. I want to make a small bead shape, elongated, and then I sweep it down for the tip. A little bit of wood at a time. I'm going to speed the lathe up a bit to help me. Just let the tool do the cutting. Ultimately, I want this to come to a point, but right now I'm going to leave it a little bit thick because I need the support of this wood as I work my way back. You're going to start picking up a little chatter at this point, so you can just bring your hand to the side and just get some gentle pressure back in towards the tool. Steadies things up a bit. You don't press too hard, it's just light, and that way your fingers don't get hot from the friction. Okay, I don't want to go any further than that, because now I want to sand and put a finish on. Remember to slow your lathe down a little bit so you don't burn the wood. And I'm going to start with 220 and just work my way up through 600. I've sanded all the way through 600 grit. The next thing I'm going to do is apply finish just like I did on the ball. Then I'm going to part the tip off here, move down to here, and part this off. But when I part this off, I'm going to leave a tenon the size of this hole so it'll meet up nicely. Now we're going to finish the tip of the icicle. Using a small spindle gouge, take very light cuts until the tip comes free. Use a touch of sandpaper to clean up the rough parts, and don't forget to dab a bit of finish onto the newly sanded area. With our calipers, we want to get the measurement of the hole in the bulb. Now we can make a properly sized tenon on the icicle using a parting tool. Part the icicle off, leaving the tenon about 1/4 inch in length. Nice fit. All we have left to do is the top. Same procedure, and then we can put this thing together. For aesthetics, I want this to be about 1/3 the length of the icicle. And this ornament will be hung on the tree with a string, so I need to leave the top thick enough to drill a hole to pass the string through. Keep working until you get a shape that you like, and then just like the icicle, sand, finish, and part off. Okay, the last thing I have to do before I glue this together is to drill the small hole that we can hang the ornament from. I've mounted my Jacob's chuck with a small drill in the headstock. I think this turned out wonderful. This Christmas ornament is going to look beautiful on our tree this year. One tip when you're working with those fast-acting super glues, be careful. Well, till the next time on the Woodturning Workshop, keep turning. Honey, we're going to need a bigger tree.